Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swirsky's Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swirsky's Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose, as long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swirsky, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swirsky, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swirsky Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts Alex and Sean. On this episode, we are going to hit the high of highs and the low of lows. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. The season is just a few short weeks away, so you can head on over to icehogs.com and pick up season tickets, single game tickets, hats, shirts, jerseys, and more. Tell them Swirsky Sports sent you.
I gotta ask you, did you go to training camp for the Blackhawks this weekend?
I did, and I went with my best friend, his wife and son, and my wife and daughter, and we had a blast.
Very nice, because I went there once in 2011 after they won their first cup, and man, they do such a great job of that training camp festival. It's a lot of fun, and it feels like it's an actual game because, you know, from the times I went, the place is pretty much full, seats-wise.
Oh yeah, it was absolutely packed until they added this year. Usually they do the 3 periods and then kind of wrap it up. This year they did another, it was a 3-on-3 10-minute period. And at that point, a lot of people had left. And so we moved from the 200 sections down to close to the glass. So
they let you do that?
Yeah, because they don't care. It's all open seating. It's first come, first serve. So we just moved right down, and it was neat. And then they brought out some former players to play one last shift in a 3-on-3. So that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was Stan Mikita and I'm drawing a blank on who else it was, but it was neat. And they Jordan Tutu was out there skating with somebody had to tell me what these are. It was Snapchat glasses.
That's cool. That's cool.
And one of the goalies, it wasn't Crawford. Was it? It was either Glass or Forsberg, I think. They played the game with a GoPro on the helmet, and then they mic'd some people up in the 3-on-3. So it was neat. They did some cool things. It was fun.
Yeah, that does sound fun. Now, when Sharp scored, I surely hope everyone stood and cheered.
Oh yeah, absolutely. People went nuts. The women did not forget that they love Patrick Sharp.
Of course not.
And there was, I would say, the Patrick Sharp jerseys present were 2-1 over Hossa.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I think everyone kind of dug those out for this occasion because, Patrick Sharp is a very popular player, and, I'm sure everyone who had one had their chance to wear one at this training festival.
Yeah, so that was good. And then my daughter was very excited because mostly we go to Ice Hogs games, so those are the players she's most familiar with, except when she watches games on TV with me. And so there was a lot of players that she, I told her that she had got the fist bump before at Ice Hogs games. I was like,
sure.
Fist bump him? And then I was like, do you remember when we met the player and he gave you the jersey? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, that's him right there. And she went, ah. And she was so excited. So it was,
now, did DeBrincat play in that? Because I know he scored the game winner for the Prospect Championship, but I wasn't sure. Did he play in that training camp festival?
He was listed on there, and I didn't because he was on the white team, and I was really focused on the red team, and and rounding up to 2.5-year-olds. So I didn't really catch it, but because I was really watching the red team and I wanted to see how Crawford looked, how Taves looked, how
Yeah.
Saad looked, and how the defense pairings were looking. And I'm a little iffy about the defensemen this year.
Yeah, I think we all are. There is some concern there, definitely. And I know Micah Roosevelt didn't pass his physical, which it's kind of sad, but it doesn't really surprise me considering he's like, what, 40 now?
He's older and he's had a ton of pretty serious injuries as far as
Yeah.
hockey goes.
I'm surprised he's still playing, frankly.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's the love of the game, clearly. But it was funny because my best friend who I went with, he's 40 as well, and he plays in an adult league once a week. And he's like, when you think you're skating pretty fast, he's like, you go to Johnny's Ice House and watch practice, and he's like, even Roosevelt is like so much faster than you could ever be. He's like, but still slow compared to some of the younger guys. And
Right. I mean, it just goes to show that you really need the special talent to be an NHL player.
yeah, because the speed is just unreal how fast they go. It's
Yeah.
TV doesn't do it justice because there's a lot of fast guys, but if you put a guy who's played high school or maybe even a little college or and it was pretty decent, you put him out there and you just watch how they skate circles around him.
Absolutely. Now, my last question about this training camp festival is, I assume there was some sort of special memorial for Pierre Palat.
I'm trying to think.
Like anything before the pregame or...
I didn't see anything, and I heard that there was supposed to be something for Hossa too, and I didn't see that either. So I don't know if I missed something.
Yeah.
There was a time that we did go into the store before it started, so they may have done something beforehand. I know.
Yeah, 'cause I thought I heard
did
something
catch,
like that.
I did catch something for Eddie O. They did a little special
Yeah,
for
sure.
Eddie O. And I realized that Eddie O and I were born at the same hospital,
Really?
and he's only 11 years older than me. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Wow.
That makes me feel old.
Hey, despite his illness, he's really kept himself in good shape. Him and Jeremy Roenick, because I met him 2 years ago, and my God, that guy is in great buff shape for his age and where he's at. Like, you got to give those NHLers, man, you got to give them credit. They stay in shape.
Yeah, I met Israel Adonijay a couple times, and he's long since gone from the NFL, and he's still like, just his biceps are just enormous, and he's just super fit, and his biceps are like the size of my waist, and I'm a bigger guy.
Yeah, I mean, you give a lot of credit to athletes who keep themselves in shape after their careers because you think about it, you see a lot who can easily let themselves go and it'd be really tempting to, but some of those guys that stay in shape, I give them a lot of credit. It'd be very tempting for me if I was like a professional athlete of any kind. I'd be tempted as hell to just kind of let myself go for a little bit and relax, but props to those guys.
Yeah, it's always there's even guys out there that have gotten in better shape after they've left professional sports.
Sure.
I'm drawing a blank. There was a guard who played for the Steelers and then left at the end of his career, played for the Cardinals, and played for them when they went to the Super Bowl against the Steelers. And I'm drawing a blank on his name, but he was a big guy, a 300-some pound guy, and when he left NFL and retired, he at that point he was 36 or so, 37 when he retired, and he started becoming a runner and like ran a marathon, and he dropped down to like 185 pounds and just looked like a completely different guy.
That's really impressive. I'd have to look up who you're talking about, but that's really impressive, especially if you play line in football where you're taking all sorts of beatings, bangs, and bruises all those years to keep up and do that kind of thing. I think that speaks a lot.
Alan Faneca.
Alan Faneca, yeah. I remember that name now. Yeah, okay. That was him. Cool.
Yeah, there's a side-by-side picture of him, and just you wouldn't even believe it's the same guy. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that.
It's some of these guys, they have to work to keep up that weight because they're just not naturally that weight.
Oh my goodness. I'm looking at it now. Oh, holy crap. You're right. Wow.
Yeah, he was so when he was 37, he finished the New Orleans Rock and Roll Marathon in under 4 hours, which is really good for a competitive runner, like for just somebody that's in good shape. Like the competitive ones where they're from like Kenya and stuff, they run it in like 2 hours. But people that when you're a regular person that's in really good shape, you consider the 4 hour mark. If you can get under that, good. And he finished in under 4 hours. And when he played, he was 6'5", 320 pounds, and he lost. Now he weighs 210.
Yeah, I'm looking at his stats now. I mean, first of all, my goodness, he was a heck of a player, and he played for a very long time. I mean, you consider, frankly, like 13 years in the NFL, that's a lot. You know, a lot of NFL careers don't last as long, and for that kind of position, credit there, 9-time Pro Bowler, and then doing all this, looking at that side-by-side comparison, I mean, it's surprising that more people don't know about his accomplishments, including myself, because that is really something.
Yeah, it was weird. Like, it never got that much publicity, and I have a bunch of friends that are Steelers fans, and they posted it, and I was just absolutely shocked, and this was a year, probably 2014 or so, and every so often I just my memory's jarred, and I think about it, and I was like, that's an incredible feat. I'm sure he's not nearly as strong, but his body's in so much better condition. His blood pressure said it was lower. His cholesterol is lower. He can run a marathon.
Yeah, and he's 40 now, so, from what I'm seeing here, he's not going to stop. So, go Alan Faneca. That's a really cool story.
Yeah, it's just absolutely incredible. Yeah, he lost 110 pounds.
It's hard enough to lose like 10 or 20 at times, but that, wow.
Yeah. But it's funny because then you think about some other guys that are current players, and they have in their contract by a certain date they have to be under a certain weight, or else they're either fined or don't hit a bonus, and they have a hard time doing it. And here's a guy that just dropped 110 pounds.
Yep. And it's like those kind of guys, they tell you the story, and they make you think like, oh, if he could do it, I could do it. And then you realize it's not easy at all.
Oh, no. I mean, losing 10 pounds is hard.
Yeah, it is.
You're like, all right, I lost 10 pounds, but then you realize it was just like, you drink a glass of water, you put it all back on, you're like, oh, it's water weight. But like actually losing real, legitimate, pounds, it's hard.
And look, I in 4 years of college, I worked out a lot. I went to the gym. I went on a lot of walks. My senior year, I walked 2 miles to school every day, there and back from the apartment I was living in. But in addition to that, you got to have a healthy diet. And unfortunately, on a college budget, the only thing that you can really afford food-wise is like junk food. So, not only do you have to work out well, you have to eat right too. And that just makes it even harder.
Yeah, I know. Like, eating well is kind of expensive. Like in college, you're just like, well, Kraft macaroni and cheese is $1 a box. That could be 2 meals. Ramen noodles are like 25 cents.
And then, all the junk in our like school cafeteria store, all like the candy bars and all the bags of chips and pretzels, everything that has sodium, sugar, fat, whatnot. That's all the cheap stuff where you go to like a salad bar and sometimes the cafeteria salad isn't very good because the lettuce is bad. And B, some of the like prepackaged stuff, like the dressing, the salad itself, that costs more money. And the sugary drinks, obviously, there's a lot big temptation there because the coolers and the refrigerators are all filled with the sugary drinks or water, and it's the low calorie Gatorade, like that kind of stuff, that costs more money. So you put that in perspective.
Like, yeah, you even go to the store now and you're like, why does Arizona iced tea cost less than water?
Yeah, and look at pop. It's so cheap. It is so incredibly cheap. Now, going to Cook County, that's a whole other story, but in all retrospect, it's a very cheap thing to afford, so if people can afford that, they'll buy it. And obviously, as much as I love pop, I know how bad it is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I try not to drink any of it. But I'm picky. I don't like most pop anyway. I like every once in a while, I like a cream soda or a root beer, but for the most part, I don't like cola, like Coke or Pepsi or anything.
Wow, good for you, because I love it way too much, and it's so tempting every time I see it.
Yeah, I think that was a big thing, is because I just don't like cola, and I don't really like carbonated beverages. It gives me the hiccups. So like if I take a couple of sips, I start getting the hiccups. So it was annoying. So I never drank it, and I would be so fat if I drank pop, because it does taste good.
But yeah, it's not good for you.
Oh yeah, I grew up in a house where like my family just drank pop, like it came out of the faucet.
Yeah, and you know what? I actually found, since I love all sorts of pop. I love cola, I love the clear, I love like root beer. I've been trying to do like a bit more of the flavored water, the carbonated flavored water, because they have like a lemon lime flavor, they have like an orange flavor, they have like a grape flavor. So like a lot of things, obviously it doesn't taste like pop, but if you get like a taste for something with flavor to drink that has a little bit of the fizz to it, then the carbonated water is, a much better solution than pop, because pop's got the sugar, the syrup, and all that, and even though there's carbonation in this water, at least there's no, sugar and chemicals and all that stuff.
Yeah, true. And then you can get the, there's Hawaiian Punch and a couple of others, Mountain Dew, maybe that have
Kool-Aid.
just the sugar rather than corn syrup, but they come in the glass jars. Ugh, pop.
Man, now I'm craving some, and I know there's there's Pepsi and a few other things in the refrigerator, so I'm just going to continue to clutch my water bottle here and only think about water.
Now I'm suddenly craving, I probably haven't had one of these in a year or two, is a Hawaiian Punch.
Oh, boy, do I love Hawaiian Punch. The different flavors were all good. The original, the purple, there's a blue, the green. That sounds so good right now.
But I don't know about you, but I'd like to talk about the Cubs first.
Heck yeah.
So I feel like this Jekyll and Hyde team is, one week we talk about them and we're bracing for the sky to fall, and then the next week it's like it's all sunshine and roses. And I mean, have you felt like that? It's week by week.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, remember last week after the sweep of the Brewers at this time, we were like, "Oh God, why?"
Yeah, I mean, because they had two games behind them, and coming up with a series against the Mets, who have always been a problem, the thorn in their side, and then a 3-game series against the Cardinals. You're like, this could be a recipe for disaster. And the Brewers are pretty much facing powder puffs except for the Cubs for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I know. And right now where we sit, compared to last week, the magic number is down to 10, and last week we were looking at like, we're X amount of games up on the Brewers, X amount of games up on the Cardinals. We're right now, after this week, I think the only number we're really focusing on is the magic number. Like, games up, okay, but I think we're really just looking at that magic number going down at this point. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's it's funny to think about is I made this chart and I was like, all right, Magic number's 10. That's still pretty high considering that they only have 13 games left. But I made this chart of what the depending on what the Cubs record was at the end of those 13 games, what the Brewers and the Cardinals would need to do in order to tie them. And if the Cubs go 10-3, they win. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
If they go 9-4, the Cardinals are still eliminated, but the Brewers would have to go 13-0 to match the Cubs 9-4. And if the Cubs go 8-5, the Brewers have to go 12-1. If the Cubs go 7-6, the Brewers have to go 11-2, and so on and so forth. And you start to realize the Cubs, although it's still not a big enough number for I think any of us to be comfortable with yet, what kind of like Herculean effort the Brewers would have to do to win this division.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was talking about earlier with my brother. Like, where I am right now is saying, I'm not celebrating a division title yet. We can't do that. But it would take a lot to not win this division at this point. And think about what the difference could have been if, say, we lost both series to the Cardinals and the Mets. Just a few games could make a really big difference, but they went 6-0 on that homestand, and they've set up a pretty good position right now. So, I'm not popping the champagne yet. I really, there's always that weird gut feeling of something weird happening, even though after we've won a World Series. But yeah, in reality, something really drastic would have to happen to not win this.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to see dramatic effects either way swinging when you start getting down to it, because the Cubs have four more games against Milwaukee, a 4-game series in Milwaukee, and then they go down to St. Louis for 4. So these numbers can just really shift.
Right.
So, but I mean, if you think about it, they got 2 in Tampa Bay, 4 Milwaukee, 4 St. Louis, and then 3 against Cincinnati. Even if they don't fare well in any of these series, you figure if they split Tampa, win 1 of 4 against Milwaukee, split St. Louis, and then take 2 of 3 from Cincinnati. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 and 7. That means the Brewers would have to go 10-3 just to tie them.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, it really is amazing knowing that after 2 games in Tampa Bay, there are going to be 8 games against the Cardinals and the Brewers. And this sweep of the Cardinals, I think, took a bit of pressure off from that Cardinals series. I know I've been biting myself in the ass every time I've said this because the Cardinals will go on an extreme winning run. But a lot of people are saying right now that 3-game sweep kind of destroyed their chances. And I'm going to go ahead and say their chances aren't 100% done, but I think that really did put a damper in things for them.
Oh, especially today's game. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail, but especially today's game. I think it not only was statistically a nail in the coffin, it was also an emotional nail in the coffin. I mean, if you think about it, is if the Cubs go 6-7 in their last 13 games, then the Cardinals would have to go 12-1.
Yeah,
and that would have to include they couldn't lose more than, they would have to take 3 of 4 from the Cubs. And that's the thing is, on one hand, if you're the Brewers and the Cardinals, having a 4-game series is against the team that's ahead of you is nice because you can make up ground. But in reality, a 4-game series is hard because you don't almost never get a sweep.
right.
It's really hard to get a 4-game sweep.
It like this the things we're talking about, there is always still a chance, but I think now we have to look at the chances of the chance, to at least make you feel a little bit better. My goal was to have the magic number down by single digits by early this week, and we're one tick away from it being in single digits. So, I just would hate to see the Cubs just absolutely tank these last few weeks, but, I think that sweep of the Cardinals really can help their motivation as well as their magic number.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And if you look at the playoff probabilities, this is not even including today. The Cubs' playoff odds are 97.3%.
That's a pretty good percentage right there. I mean, I said...
I'm sorry, 97.8. Sorry.
Oh, whoa. Well, there you go. I mean, chances are pretty good. Someone was talking earlier to me and to others about the ideal time you'd want to clinch the division. Now, I think if things can go right overall over the next week, I could see them clinching in St. Louis. I would really not like to have to wait to the very last series to possibly clinch, because that would mean things would probably get a little uncomfortably close. But again, who knows? I would like them to clinch as soon as possible. Let's just say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be interesting to see what sort of team we see with the Tampa Bay Rays. It's only a 2-game series, but the Rays have the absolute thinnest of chances to make the playoffs. And I think if the Cubs win one of two, they're out. So are we going to see a desperate team that's just throwing everything against the wall? Or are they going to say, well, we're pretty much mathematically eliminated here?
Right. Yeah. This division race is so interesting because when you put it all in perspective, like we talked about last week, this is the first time Joe Maddon's Cubs have really been in this tight of a playoff race since he's been here, because in 2015 they ran away with a playoff spot. 2016 they ran away with the division. At this time last year they already had the division clinched a few days prior. So it makes things kind of interesting, and I think the players kind of like this race. I think Anthony Rizzo indicated that last year was almost kind of boring, being up 17 games in September.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps you motivated. And honestly, I think, in between the last time we did a show last week and now, it was announced that because of the hurricane, the Brewers would get that 3-game series that they were supposed to play in Miami against the Marlins. It was being moved to Miller Park, not a neutral site, to Miller Park.
Right.
And you have to know that the Cubs, whether they publicly said it or not, they had to be pretty PO'd about that.
And I actually got into it with a few Brewers fans about that on Twitter.
And I mean, I get it. Like, you have to the safety and well-being. If you do it at a neutral site, is anybody going to show up? Are you going to play in front of 500 people?
Right.
And it's much easier to just do it at one of the home parks. I get it. I'm not faulting MLB, but for a team that cried and complained that there was a rain delay and that a day game got moved to a night at the same place, and they cried and complained and went public with it, that suddenly gets in a tight division race gets announced that they get 3 extra home games. Come on now. That's just if it happened the other way around, that the Brewers would be crying and complaining.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of what I said. Like, obviously we know this wasn't the Brewers' decision, so I'm not going to pin that whole decision on them. And I get the situation was tough. My whole point was I don't want to hear another word from them. They got 3 more home games in a tight division race. Like I don't want to hear them complain about that kind of petty stuff ever again. The fact that they complained about getting more rest for moving a game ahead, like, I mean, come on, that's just ridiculous. So I don't want to hear it from them ever again.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that that they're 500 on the road and they're 43-34 at home. So it's definitely they get a huge advantage and took 2 or 3 from a Marlins team that's not half bad.
Yeah, I mean, thank God the Marlins won last night because, the Brewers won the other 2 games, and it's just, boy, this Brewers team will not go away. I mean,
I know. That Friday game
go away.
I was watching the score and I saw it was 2-2, and it was like, all right, Marlins maybe will take this game. That'll be nice. Is win that first game of a 3-game series and put the pressure on the Brewers with the Cubs winning and such. And I wake up in the morning and I was like, the Brewers scored 8 unanswered, 10-2 win. Ugh.
Yep. I mean, it's like everything, nothing seems to faze them. They're hitting the crap out of the ball. Their pitchers are suddenly Cy Young winners. Their bullpen has been lights out. And that's, I mean, this isn't like a one-time thing this season. They've been doing it all year, and then they kind of have a slump every now and then, but then they climb right out of it. How many times this year have we said, okay, this is it. This is where Milwaukee fades away. And then no. They've kept coming back from the dead every time. I mean, remember the All-Star break, the post-All-Star break, the Cubs erased the 5.5 game deficit, and they took the division lead. And it looked like the Brewers were like, okay, first half fluke, it's over. But no, they keep coming back and keep coming back.
Yeah, it's really frustrating. I mean, hopefully this ends up being beneficial to the Cubs, that they can never put it away and they can never fully just relax. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to sound like a complainer here. It's also kind of frustrating knowing that if the Cubs maybe had 3-4 more wins right now, there wouldn't even be a race. But, what can you do? They're in the position that they're in the position, and they got to do what they got to do. Because you can't change anything about the past. You can't go back and win a game you lost. You got to go ahead and win only what's forward. And, you got to have a lot of confidence in this team now, considering the circumstances we just talked about. But there's always that little tiny unnerving thing about it where you fear the absolute worst. Because we've seen a lot of scenarios this year where the absolute best happened, like these past 6 days, or the absolute worst happened. Last weekend, we got swept by the Brewers and the Cardinals swept the Pirates. So it goes to show how up and down this season has been.
I'm looking quickly, and maybe I misspoke about Tampa Bay. They're a little closer than I thought, but their statistical odds are less than 1% of making the playoffs. They're 5.5 games back of that second wild card spot, and in between them is they would have to leapfrog Kansas City, Texas, Seattle, Los Angeles Angels, and Minnesota to get it.
Yeah, that's going to be really tough.
Yeah, so you just wonder what their mentality is going to be. Are they going to be packing it in, or are they still going to be playing tough?
I think you got to anticipate playing tough because, A, they're not going to give up until they're eliminated, I really don't think. And B, that there's going to be thousands upon thousands of Cubs fans traveling down to Tampa, and Tampa Bay is going to want to win in front of them. So, it don't take them lightly is what I'd say.
I don't know. Because of the hurricane, couldn't we get those 2 games here?
Yeah, because they played this weekend, didn't they? Yeah. Except Tampa Bay, I don't think it got hit as hard as Miami, so that's probably why.
No, it didn't. Yeah, I think it was. It wasn't that so much that the park was unsafe. I think it was they didn't want to divert police and other emergency people that would have to be security at the games.
And I get that.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I get that.
I'm not mad about it. It was just more of a pointed thing towards the smarmy Brewers.
Right. It's not that we're mad at the Brewers. We're not, Brewers fans, they got 3 extra home games, they bought tickets, whatever. It's just, I don't want to hear them complain about the Cubs scheduling again after that. So, it's as simple as that. And I don't want to have any disrespect towards, the whole Miami situation. I really don't. I get why they moved it. It makes sense. But, just remember that the Brewers did get 3 extra home games, even though they were technically on the scorecard the road team. But, just think about that next time you complain about the Cubs.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking at the Cubs before we, hop back and just talk a little bit about the actual games. The probables for the Cubs right now, game 1 against Tampa Bay is John Lester versus Chris Archer. And the good news for the Cubs is over his last 3 starts, Chris Archer is 0-3 with a 14.14 ERA.
Well, hopefully that continues.
That's you like to you like to keep that trend up. And then Wednesday's game is going to be sorry, I just clicked off of it. It's going to be TBD. They haven't announced who was going to be pitching for the Cubs, which means I heard a rumor it will not be Arrieta, but he will be ready for the Brewers series.
Okay, yeah. I mean, either they go with Sang again or they go Mike Montgomery. That would be my guess.
Probably. And then it'll be against Blake Snell, who has not had the best of seasons so far.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, he's got a 4.5 ERA, only 3 wins. So, not like they're pitching with their that well. So, that's good news for the Cubs. Hopefully we can knock that magic number down a little bit by the time that they've.
And here's the other thing about the Brewers. They're only 2.5 out of the wild card, so it's not like they're going to get dejected or anything if the Cubs keep winning, because they're going to keep playing for that wild card even if they don't win the division. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And Colorado is not like playing lights out.
No, they just blew a 3-0
so.
lead to the Padres today at home.
Yeah, so there's definitely a chance that they could catch that wild card spot. I would much rather see Colorado in there. I think just because they're trending way downward. But, you never know with what happens, because you never want to hope for somebody in the playoffs, because sometimes you get what you wish for.
Yeah, I mean, a perfect example, in 2015, after we won the NLDS, I really did not want to see the Dodgers, and I really wanted to see the Mets. Yeah, look what happened.
Yeah. I mean, you never know what you're going to get, because teams just click on the right time. I mean, statistically, if you look at the players and you look at what they can do, you probably want to play the Brewers. But it's always about catching a team at the right time. I mean, there was a 13 game stretch where you would absolutely love to catch the Dodgers because they were just terrible. But then there was a 22 game stretch where you didn't even want to look at the Indians because they were just going to steamroll you.
Exactly. And looking at the wild card scenario and potential scenarios, if the Cubs won the division and the Brewers won the wild card, they would only potentially meet each other in the NLCS. So you could also look at it that way as well, because if the Cubs do indeed win this division, and I still say if because it's not completely done yet, it looks like we're going to play the Nationals, and if we win that, we will play the winner of the Dodgers series, who plays the first wild card winner, which would be likely the Diamondbacks versus either the Brewers or the Rockies. So, you look at your scenarios right there, and you kind of start thinking about it as it gets closer and closer.
Yeah, I mean, they're in that losing streak of the Dodgers. They look like there could be some slim chance that the Nationals could catch them, but even if the Nationals get hot and the Brewers cool down, it's still like a 7-game lead,
Right.
with
Right.
13 left to go. That's a big lead to overcome. So yeah, you have to look at it as, if you're the Cubs, your goal is to play the Nationals in the first round, because that means you won the division.
Now, there's something I'm trying to find here. Is the magic number, obviously we know, is 10 to clinch the division. Is there a magic number right now to clinch a playoff spot, even though they're in the division lead and not in a wild card race? It's got to be around the same thing, right?
It's got to be right around the same, because they are. They're. Depending on what did Colorado.
Yeah, they
finish their
lost.
game
They had a
today?
3-0 lead, and they lost 4-3 to the Padres.
Okay, so they are. Cubs are 1.5 games up on them. So, yeah, I guess their magic number would be 7 or 8.
To clinch a
I'd have
playoff
to-
spot. Yeah.
Let me calculate it quick. I take that back. It's 12. It's 12 to clinch
Okay.
the wild card. It's a little more because they're
Right.
closer. Sorry, than the Brewers. Yeah. So, yeah, but I mean, the Colorado is. I'm not worried about that. I think they're much more likely to win this division than having.
Yeah,
to
and
compete for the
believe me, I'm
I'm
not
sure
looking to
positive
compete
with
for the
that.
wild card. I was just curious. Because look, whoever wins that second wild card, you're going to have to open in Arizona against a very good Diamondbacks team this year. And then if you win that, you have to go to play the Dodgers. You have to open in LA. So I do not want to go through that.
No, and I don't want to play against a Paul Goldschmidt whose goal is to win that game at home in front of your rowdy fans, and when they've gotten this chance to reset their rotation and rest guys. Not a team I would
Not
want
at
to
all.
play.
And I mean, let's face it, postseason against the Diamondbacks, even though Short has been pretty bad.
Yeah, I think the playoffs are going to be really interesting this year, because that an Arizona Dodgers series is going to be really interesting, and I think it's going to be a fight to the
Oh,
finish.
yeah. I mean, look how well Arizona played the Dodgers this year. It seems like the Dodgers, who have all this talent, they're easily counter-talented with a lot of the same type of guys on Arizona. A lot of good hitters, a lot of good pitchers. I think the main advantage that the Dodgers would have over Arizona is a bullpen. But, man, you have like Paul Goldschmidt going against Cody Bellinger, and you have Clayton Kershaw versus Zach Greinke, the former Dodger. That's some great matchups right there.
Yeah, it's gonna be a tough one to play, and just looking at their head-to-heads this year, and
Because didn't Arizona sweep them during that big losing streak?
yeah,
And I think even remember before that losing streak, Arizona was able to beat them a few times.
it's there's got to be a better.
Well, while you're looking for that, there's another thing I'm going to bring up really quickly while you find that information. I think that if you look at a really interesting race, it's the AL wild card. You talked about some of the teams in that race. Boy, the Angels in Minnesota, like a lot of people are talking about the Angels and how they've done a really good job. But Minnesota, I mean, they're the second wild card right now and they're 2 up, which is really, really, like Minnesota, like on paper doesn't even look that great. But I mean, they've been getting it done. They're 78 and 71. In a potential wild card right now, they'd have to play the Yankees, and I'm not really sure they'd be able to beat them. But I mean, that's something that's really not talked about a lot. More people are talking about the Angels and their surprising run in it than Minnesota, who's actually in the second wild card.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got the number. Is Arizona? They've played 19 times so far, and Arizona's 11 and 8.
See, there you go.
Dodgers. It is. They only have a losing record. Dodgers only have a losing record against 2 teams, and it's Arizona and Colorado.
Both division teams and both potential playoff teams. Now, it means nothing in the postseason. It means absolutely nothing, but I think it at least tells you that those teams are really good enough to compete.
Absolutely. I mean, it just even that's looking at a team that has played 700 baseball for most of the season, and they have a losing record against those teams. So that just says something. I'm looking at the Cubs in this grid. Is they have a losing record against Colorado, the Dodgers, Milwaukee, San Diego.
Yeah, that's
Washington. Ugh.
But hey, you know what? If they make the postseason, none of that matters.
No, it doesn't. And their record against against the Nationals is 3-4. So they played pretty evenly. But the ugly one to me is that San Diego one.
Yeah.
Just think, that series where they got swept was
and
so bad.
I'm actually really surprised the Padres are where they are. Right now they're 66 and 83. Yeah, that ain't good, but I actually didn't think they were going to even reach 60 wins this year. I'll be completely honest.
They're bad.
And I do not understand how the Cubs got swept by that team.
Cubs were playing real bad.
They couldn't hit. They couldn't field. The pitching went downhill. I mean, I remember the first game, they jump out to a 2-0 lead. Kyle Hendricks looks really good, and we're like, okay, this should be an easy series. And then the Cubs stranded a bunch of runners, and then all of a sudden, Tyler Renfroe hits a grand slam off Hendricks, and then all of a sudden they get swept by the Padres.
Yeah, it was so infuriating. It was just not what you wanted to see for this Cubs team. And you think even if they could have won one of those, it would have been an extra cushion on this.
Oh yeah, if they would have just won that series against San Diego, if you took like 2 or 3 in San Diego, that's 2 more wins right there. And again, that's probably, you're looking at something very different right now. And again, like we've said, the chances for the Cubs right now to win the division are pretty good, but a few more wins added to the record right now, there wouldn't even be any talks of a playoff race for the NL Central.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking at the games that they played this week, is they had a 3-game series at home against the Mets and a 3-game homestand against the Cardinals, and both were looming pretty big with how close that this time last week they were only 2 games ahead of the Cardinals and only 2 games ahead of the Brewers. And you're like, this is not good, especially with 3 games against St. Louis. And we all know that voodoo magic that they have at the end of the year. And the Cubs took care of business. They swept the Mets and they swept the Cardinals. And against the Mets, it wasn't particularly close in any of those games, as they really brought the boomsticks against the back half of that Mets rotation.
Oh, that Mets team is really bad right now.
Yeah, I mean, they really, DeGrom is their only real starter.
And they were lucky to avoid him.
Yeah, they avoided the one good pitcher that you didn't want to face. But, I mean, the way the Cubs were swinging the bat that series, it didn't really matter. They probably would have still knocked 8 runs off of him anyway.
They scored 30-some runs in that series, and against the Brewers, they scored a total of 3.
Yeah, they had more runs in one inning against the Mets than they did the
And they
entire
had
series
tons
against
of
the Brewers.
innings where they scored more than 3 against the Mets. And it was like in that final game with the Sang start, when they were down 3-0 early, you knew the Cubs were going to come right back, and they did. I wasn't even worried down 3-0.
Oh, absolutely. When they were down 3-0, against the Brewers, even against the Cardinals, I probably would have been
For sure.
biting my nails and sweating nervously. But in that series and the way that they were swinging the bat, I was like, I am not worried about this at all. They're going to be able to catch this. And, even when it went back and forth a little bit, I'm like, once they
because you
pull the
had Mike
starter,
Montgomery come in.
Cubs, the Cubs are going to pull away from this one, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, Mike Montgomery came in, and he had some nice few innings there, and the Cubs' bats started to swing away, which has been kind of a theme on that homestand after the Brewers series, where the bats started off kind of scoreless and slow the first few innings, and then mid innings it was tee off, take off time.
Yeah, and it was nice. I mean, after that Brewers series, I know Joe Madden started making batting practice mandatory, which, had been, since he came here, optional for players.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it was mandatory because they weren't swinging the bat well.
No.
And you saw Baez looking like Baez from a couple of years ago when he got sent back down to the minors, where he was just falling down, striking out, and guys just started to look sloppy. And I don't know if that just sent a message to them to reset and take a better approach, or if actually going in there and hitting batting practice with the instructors and made a difference. But whatever it is they came to swing against the Mets, and hitting is contagious. Is once somebody starts hitting, other people will likely start to hit, and it carried over into the Cardinal series.
And you had in those Mets games, it seems like in all 3, everyone who started or came up off the bench had at least one hit or got on base at least once. And it was nice spreading of the wealth.
Yeah, I think there was one point that every single player that had been in the game had either had a hit or an RBI,
including the pitcher.
Yeah, including the pitcher, and that was crazy to me. That can't happen that often.
You know what I gotta say? This is just kind of a little side note about Jose Quintana. Can I say how impressed I am with the way he's handled the bat so far?
Yeah, for a guy who in the American League didn't swing the bat very much, he's looked not out of place. I mean, when John Lester came over, he just looked, he looked odd trying to swing that bat. Like, it just looked unnatural. At least Quintana looks, comfortable for a pitcher up there.
And John Lester, even this year, he's looked pretty good at the plate.
Yeah, he's definitely worked on it. He's still a far away as far as pitchers go from being Travis Wood or Jake Arrieta or Madison Bumgarner or anything, but they look much more competent.
And if there is one great thing about Cubs history, they've always had a good history of hitting pitchers. You look at their great teams over the years, you could talk about their pitchers and how well they hit. I mean, Ferguson Jenkins was a good hitter. Rick Sutcliffe was a good hitter. Wood and Pryor were good hitters. Zambrano was a good hitter. Arrieta's a good hitter. Travis Wood was a great hitter, as you mentioned, and others. So it's kind of a cool little thing to have. And, we'll talk about today's game in a bit, but, there was a key at bat for Quintana where he did a really good job, and that kind of made me think of it. And he also had a big suicide squeeze in that game against the Mets that drove in a run, so that was also big.
Yeah, so it was nice to see, and it's always nice for the. I understand you're not going to ever have like a high batting average for your pitcher. I mean, even a good hitter like Travis Wood, what did he bat, like 250?
Yeah, and for a pitcher, that's great.
Yeah, for a pitcher, that's great. But in the grand scheme of things, as far as your hitters, that's not a high batting average. So when you have a pitcher that can hit and at least look comfortable in that bat and make the pitcher have to work, that definitely adds to your your innings. I remember as a kid, most pitchers, they didn't even work at that. It was basically an automatic out. They stood there with the bat on their shoulders, and the guy threw 3 strikes, and that was it. And, if you had 2 outs in the 9th spot, it was just basically, all right, well, we start with the top of the order next inning. And now it's not the case. Is you've got guys are working with their at bats, and they take it seriously, just like they do with pitching, and they do things to help themselves. You think about how many times has Hendricks knocked in the only RBIs that have been scored for him, and they were the difference between win and a loss. So you see these guys.
You know what's really impressive when you think of last year? Remember last year's NLDS, how well the pitchers hit? You had Travis Wood hit a home run. You had Jake Arrieta hit a 3-run home run off Madison Bumgarner, and you had Kyle Hendricks hit a big 2-run single in Game 2 against Jeff Samardzija. So it was kind of cool seeing their pitching staff swing the bat in that playoff series.
Yeah, it's always fun. And I have a buddy who he's a White Sox fan and a big American League guy, and he's just absolutely like against pitchers batting. He's like, you want to have your best guys at the plate, and you should have the pinch hitter.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was Charlie Manuel.
He just mounts this argument, and I'm like, I actually like National League Baseball. I think it adds, I mean, you think about, God, who was the Phillies manager when I still lived there? Charlie Manuel. Yeah, and he didn't know how to do a double switch. No idea when he got there. Didn't know how to do a double switch. So you have just more strategy involved with being a National League club. You have to be able to work your bullpen better because
there's a lot of strategy behind it.
You have to consider, usually National League pitchers pitch less innings per start than American League pitchers because you don't have to worry about their at bat. In the National League, you have to consider, all right, the pitcher spot is due up. Am I comfortable enough letting him pitch that much further that it makes it worthwhile to have him at bat rather than
it's like I like the traditional National League way, but I also realize that having a DH would be really beneficial for the Cubs. That way you could have both Schwarber and Almora in the lineup at the same time. So I get both sides of it, but yeah, there are times where I really do like a good old National League style of baseball.
Getting everyone their rest and making sure that everyone is preserving their arms. So it's just
going to happen sooner or later, yeah.
And it makes the game more cerebral, which is what I kind of like about it.
I think it might be as soon as the early next decade, frankly. Yeah, I mean that's one thing that is unique about it. Whether you like one rule or the other, it is unique.
I fully agree with you, and I think ultimately the National League is going to get the designated hitter. I don't know when, but I would guarantee within the next 10 years the National League moves to a designated hitter because it's always so. It's weird to have a major sport, where the two different conferences have different sets of rules.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, you can't, it's hard to justify as a sport that you just, these are the rules for this team, but this team has different rules.
That's very
And then
true.
when
That
you
is
meet
very,
in the
very
World
true.
Series,
And I think that
depending on where
the
they play,
debate of
which
the
rules they
DH has
play,
been like,
it's
it obviously
I
was
don't know,
implemented
it's
in
a
like
little
what,
weird,
the 70s?
and I get it, and I would rather.
Yeah, I want to
they
say it
go
was like
into
the
the National League
70s at some
rules, but,
point, and
that's not
it's
gonna
kind of
happen.
amazing
It's
to
either gonna
me
be
at times that it's
everybody gets
lasted
a
this
national-
long where it's
designated hitter,
segregated.
or it
But
stays the way
again,
it
there was that
is.
uniqueness
It's not gonna
factor
go the
to
other-
it,
there's
and
0%
it's
chance of going the
it's
other way.
lasted that uniqueness, and like you said,
mean,
that won't last
even
forever.
if-
I
even
think
if,
it'll be changed sooner than
Commissioner
later.
wanted that
but
way, and the owners wanted
know,
it that
look,
way.
last year in the World
The
Series,
Players Association
the
is so
Cubs had more
strong,
success
they'll fight because it
in
keeps a
Cleveland
lot of
because
veteran
Kyle
players
Schwarber
in
was
the job.
back, and that was a pretty big deal. So it kind of makes the World Series a bit more interesting too. And I am at least glad that if you're going to have that segregated rule, then get rid of that stupid,
was before I was
All-Star
born.
game determines home field advantage, because that's kind of silly. Yeah. Absolutely. It was a postseason game. It felt like it. Honestly, it was some of the best he was looking since he was a Cub. And it wasn't even all on him. I mean, that first out, it should have been a strikeout, and B, unfortunately, Schwarber did not take a very good route at that ball and then ended up dropping in.
I
But
think everybody in the world
really, that
hates
inning should have been over by that time.
But I think the last thing with the Cubs is I wanted to discuss a little bit
To
about
Dexter
today's
Fowler.
because I thought it was huge, and yeah, and it was great because the Cubs were getting, they scored a couple of good runs.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I felt that same way.
To get a 3-0 lead, and Quintana was pitching fantastic. It was probably and then he had one bad inning. Yeah, and it ended up with a 3-run home run and tied at 3-3. And yeah.
Oh,
and
my stomach it sank down to the
mean,
bottom of my
it's
knees when
the
I saw
Cub to me.
Grichuk come up.
It's against the Cardinals. It's late in the season, and it's an important game. And I'm like, oh man, the Cardinals. are just gonna steal this
236
one, aren't
going
they?
into this game.
And the Cubs ended up getting one more run.
He's murdered the
to,
Cubs.
to take
Murdered
the lead.
them.
And in that 8th inning, I got really nervous because Brian Dunston came in, and I don't think he pitched bad, but just was having a little bit of problems finding the strike zone. Got the bases loaded with 2 outs, and even before that, I guess when I saw there was one guy on for Grichuk. Yeah, and I'm like, this guy, I'm like, what's his batting average this year? I'm like, I guarantee it's terrible, but I'm so deathly, yeah, I'm like, I'm deathly afraid of this guy. And I look, I'm like, 236. I'm like, I'm scared of a 236 hitter stealing a game from the Cubs.
Oh yeah, me too. I was ecstatic when
And I actually,
when that strikeout happened. And you remember the inning
we have
before?
a family room and TV in the basement.
Strope was in
I
some
went
trouble,
upstairs, and I'm
too.
like, I can't watch this at bat. And I came down, and I'm like, I still hear Cubs fans. I was like, either that was a quick commercial break and that inning's over, or this is getting ugly. And I came downstairs and bases are loaded for Carpenter, and I was like, this guy's if he's there's one guy that's worse than Grichuk, it's Carpenter.
Oh yeah, I thought it was
And
gone off
they-
the
they
bat.
sh- then
Wade
they showed
Davis
his-
thought it was gone off
once
the
they
bat.
showed
Did
his
you see
stats
his reaction?
Of what he does with the bases loaded, where he bats like a 568. I'm like, all right, that they just jinxed this guy. He's
Yeah,
gonna
in
strike out. And
pretty much center
there you
field,
go,
a little bit
strikes
over
out.
to the
I was-
right, but it
I'm
was in
fist
pretty much
pumping in the
center
basement.
field. Yeah, at the track. Oh yeah, because he just gingerly, just kind of stepped back, kept his eye on it. Just caught it like it was nothing.
Yeah,
But yeah, you're definitely
and-
right about
and
that.
even in
Because
that ninth
when you
inning,
heard it off the
Wade
bat, you
Davis got
heard
in
A, the loud crack,
with such
and
a
B,
slim
the
margin,
the collective
he got in a little
O.
bit of trouble too, and the last out happened to be Dexter Fowler, and he hit that one with some noise. If the wind hadn't been blowing in, that probably would have been a home run.
Yeah, you saw the flags.
Yeah, and I can't remember. Was it Elmore that caught that one? He was. I think he was the only one that didn't think it was going out. And honestly, is we've seen Dexter Fowler enough to the way that ball came off that bat. You're like, oh, that's a home run, and they noted just before, I think maybe the seventh inning, is the wind started blowing inward, and you could watch the flags, and the wind was a huge factor because the wind is there's probably only one or two ballparks in the same category as Wrigley Field as far as the wind being able to dictate what the game is like. And when the wind is blowing in,
It's
really
funny
hard to
if
hit
you
a
look
home
at the
run
drive off the
because
bat,
if
like
you hit
just
too
when
high,
contact
it
was
just knocks it
made.
down.
That
You've
looked
gotta
like it
hit
was going to go a
basically
hell lot further
some sort
than
of,
the
like,
final
Glen
home run
Allen
he hit as a
Hill
Cub in Game
laser
7.
beam
Like in Game 7,
line
off the
drive
bat,
home
I
runs
thought
to
that was
get
going to be a
him out.
pop fly, and then it
And
kept
that-
carrying. But
the way it
boy,
came
in
off
this
the
game,
bat was,
Fowler looked like he got all of
had some
that.
height to it,
And,
so you knew it was
luckily
gonna
it didn't
get
get
caught up
out.
in
But
the-
boy, the home run he did hit that did get out, I mean, that was a bomb, too.
But emotionally, you're just like, no, now it's 5-4 Cardinals going to the bottom of the ninth. Ugh. And when I saw, and as I saw Elmore
Yeah.
running back, I'm like, please let him catch it.
Yeah,
Please let him catch
yeah,
it.
I mean,
and I watched how comfortable he looked, and it started making
it's
me
funny
feel better. And when I
because
saw him set up to make the catch,
when Dexter Fowler
I
came
knew
to
he
the
had it.
plate, I said, boy, he's either going to end this game or he's going to give him the lead. It's not going to be anything other but. It's not like he's going to walk or get a hit and keep the inning going. I'm like, he's either going to get a home run or he's going to get the last out. And luckily, it was the last out. And they showed his reaction when that was caught. And you can tell he was just like, oh, God, really? And I just wonder how he feels. Like, how does it feel to like be in the
honestly,
the stadium
if
that
you-
really made you famous,
know,
with
if
the
you
team
showed
that
me
made you
just
famous
the ball
last
hitting the
year,
bat on both
and
of
know
those,
that you
I
and your
probably
team
couldn't
that
have
you're
been
with
able to
now
differentiate, to be honest with you.
went like what?
That's
The
how
Cardinals only
clean we
won
got
one
both.
game at Wrigley Field all year. Right. It's hard not to like his personality. Ugh. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, he's the one who came back in the first place. That looked like when he was gone. I mean, remember, everyone thought he was going to
It's
Baltimore,
gotta
and
be
then
a
he
little
comes
bit of
back.
mixed bag of emotions
So
because,
he came back in the first place and got us
Cubs
that World
fans still love
Series.
him,
So
I
we should
think.
be very
But,
thankful for that because
there-
you don't
there's always
see
gonna
that.
be the meatballs that hate him because he's a Cardinal, but I think
Yeah,
for
yeah, I
most
thought it was a
part,
done deal.
people like him. He is a really likable guy. Yeah, it's not like Ryan Terrio when he left and
Yeah.
was a piece of garbage. I mean, is Dexter Fowler? You knew he wasn't coming back. You knew the Cubs didn't have it in their budget to bring him back.
No, we don't.
It was
Absolutely
not
not.
like he spurned the Cubs.
Absolutely
it
not.
was. I mean, if you had to categorize it, the Cubs probably spurned him. But I mean, it was Peter Gammons reported that he signed with the Orioles.
A lot of injuries.
I mean,
yeah.
it was like
Got off to a really rough start
I
too,
mean, I
both
think
playing and everything.
pretty much everybody thought he had signed. I think the Orioles thought he was an Oriole, and he just turned that one down and came back to the Cubs for a 1-year deal, and that we don't have the World Series without him. Flat out that fluke thing that a guy turning down a 3-year deal to come and play for a 1-year deal.
It's like the funny thing is,
which I've never
we
seen
always
happen.
wish Dex the best, except when he's playing the Cubs. Then
the
if
difference
he does something
between
against the
winning a World Series
Cubs,
and not. And
Cubs
so
fans
you
get
can't
really,
hate on the
really
guy.
mad. So
And
put
he's
that
had
in
a tough
perspective
season.
as well.
When he's played well, but he's had some injuries this season. And
Sure, yeah.
yeah, so
And good for him for hitting the home run, but hey,
it's
Cubs
gotta
won,
be,
so
mixed bag for him, because you see a lot of people that you just completely bonded with over the last several years, and you won a World Series with, and now you're on their hated rival, and you're fans, even if they like you, they still look at you differently because they're not cheering when you go to the plate. They may like you, but they're not cheering for you when you get to the plate. I mean, honestly,
yeah.
if
Now, one
Cubs
other
could
thing
win
I
the
wanted to
game
talk to you about in
10-0
this Cardinals
and
series,
Fowler
I
goes
wanted
4
to
for
talk
4
about
with
the
4
Lackey
singles.
Contreras
I'm happy with that.
ordeal
I'm
with
fine.
you,
But-
and I kind of wanted to get your opinion on how you felt about the way that sequence of events went down.
Yeah, it
because
was
my
it
personal
was a tough
thought,
game.
my
It was
personal
very
feeling was
playoff
on John
atmosphere.
Lackey's perspective. I'm kind of happy he blew up in that umpire's
saw
face, because
some good plays by the
that's something you
Cubs.
got to stand up for. That was
saw the
embarrassing on
Cardinals game out of it.
MLB's
I thought the
part with
Cardinals,
that kind of call. I mean,
you saw
I don't blame him
the
for being
first 2
pissed
games
on
of the
that.
series
Now, do I think
they really
Contreras
struggled with some
slamming
defensive
down
plays,
was the
and
wisest
this
thing?
game,
No, you didn't want to see him,
much different, and,
get ejected or suspended in a crucial
I just
time in
thought
the
it was-
year.
I thought
But,
both teams
you also have
really
to
elevated
understand
their
that
play,
when
and
you're a
it was
player on the
a
field,
really good
emotions run high, and it's much harder to control your emotions in the heat of the moment in a game like that when you're playing. That's as bad as it gets.
I mean, first off, let me say
Yeah.
is that was such a blown call. That was, I mean, it was, it arguably was the worst blown. Okay, I was gonna say it was the worst thing I've ever seen, but then I saw one of the judges' scores on the Canelo Alvarez fight, but that's neither here nor there. But that was such a blown call. That
I was gonna say you
I absolutely agree
can't
with you,
expect
and,
John Lackey to be calm in that situation, because it's not gonna happen. And Ice
people
Cube
are
has a
like,
better
"Oh,
chance in
you just
hell
gotta-
than that happening.
you got to deal with it. They're professional athletes. You just got to go out there. But you know what?
Yes, he is.
These are 2 teams in a playoff race that, at the time, it was a much closer series. The standings were much closer, and you have.
And you know what? Chris
very
Bryant, the
close
post
game at
game,
the time,
said that
and
explosion by
you
John
have
Lackey
this
fired them
blown
up.
call, which could have been the difference between a win and a loss, and at this point in time, that could be the difference between making the playoffs and not. And when it's that bad, that egregious, that you just have to stand up for it. And John Lackey's a fiery guy.
Yes.
Wilson Contreras is a really fiery guy too. And as a young player, he also feeds off of the energy of his pitcher. And when you see John Lackey that fired up, is you damn well know Wilson Contreras is getting fired up. I mean, like looking back on it, is I forgot who was talking about it, and it was a badly framed by Wilson Contreras, and I think he acknowledged that, but so he kind of had to jump back in to catch it, but everything else was just right down the heart of the plate.
It was right over the heart of the plate, and Martinez was walking off. Lackey and everyone else was walking off. When the batter is walking off, that kind of says something.
Yeah, when they just know that if this was like neighborhood league, the inning would have been over because they would have been like, yeah, that was totally a strike. I struck out. Boom, walk away. But it was so bad, and I'm one for when you should be able to give it to the referee or the umpire, depending on the sport, right then and there. You should be able to give them an earful when it's so bad. If you get to be a reputation of you bitch and moan about everything,
right?
But when it's so bad, because one of the most frustrating things for me being a sports fan is no league ever goes back and goes, yeah, we totally blew that. They always 100% stand by the officiating, even when video evidence proves that they're at 100% wrong in every tool imaginable. Is the the strike zone thing from that they post on the screen, that where it tells you where the pitch was.
Yeah, the strike tracker. Yeah,
that's like technology, and it showed dead strike. You showed the replay. There's clearly a strike. Everything's a strike. And Major League Baseball is just, they're going to back the umpire. Always.
Right. And which is why it's kind of surprising when you see umpires apologize and say, hey, we got it wrong, because you don't really see that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm okay. It can't be an easy job, and these things happen so fast. You're basically in the field of play. You have to wear a special mask so you don't get, a ball crushing your skull. It's not an easy job. I'm acknowledging that, but I would just like to see the league step up more in all sports and say when they blew a call. I mean, obviously you can't go back and be like, we're going to alter the result of the game, but just come out and say, hey, listen, and actually show fans and the ownership and the players and the coaches, this is what we do. This is how we evaluate our referees. Because if you consistently see an official that's much worse than the other officials, is maybe it's time to move that official out and bring in somebody that's better. Is when players can't play anymore, you replace them. Is if umpires can't officiate anymore, then it's time. And it'd be nice to see that, hey, specifically with baseball, is a lot of people are calling for computerized strike zone.
Or at least a reevaluation of umpire staff. Kind of the whole idea of reevaluate your guys, weed out some of the old guys, and if you're going to have human umpires, bring in some young ones or bring in the computers.
Yeah, I think a happy medium is just that. Because baseball and the umpires union, and they don't want to go to the robo ump. And so if you don't want to do that, is show the league that, listen, we use technology and we compare the stats of versus the computer, what percent this umpire versus this umpire is different than than what the computer is, and we see where the average is, and is somebody way below? Is somebody have, a much loose or tight strike zone, and what do we do about it? And just show that you're trying to be better rather than we're just having the status quo.
And you know what? Sometimes if you could get like a younger set of eyes that could focus a bit more, it'd be more beneficial considering how, look, a lot of pitchers are throwing a lot harder now, and you're going to need something really sharp to pick up those balls and strikes. And if you guys have older guys like Joe West, that might not be the best thing or most efficient thing to have.
Yeah, and baseball umpires I have a friend who umped for college, and he would have loved to have been a professional, but I asked him about it, and he said basically you have to go to this one specific school for it, and it's basically after that it's all politics. So it's not even who's the best or who's worked the hardest. It becomes a political game,
which just hurts the game of baseball more. So that's kind of garbage.
Yeah, and as a sport that is, doing well right now, but clearly has an eye for a potential dwindling market with younger fans, you have to start thinking about these types of things. Is what's gonna turn a fan off, and having
right.
I know for me that's part of the reason I watch less basketball, is because the rules have completely changed since the last I really enjoyed it, and nothing, it's either follows ticky-tack, and it depends on who did it, and
right,
there's no traveling, and those things annoy me, and it depends on who the referee is, what they call, what they don't call. I like more regimented and rigid than that. And baseball is supposed to be that sport. And, now you have so many umpires who have this is this umpire's strike zone, or this is this umpire's strike zone. And it's gonna start turning fans off.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, you could see how pissed people are getting on Twitter and social media, and it's only going to continue if they don't change anything.
Yeah, and when you get a fan base as big as the Cubs fan base, and it's one thing if this happens to, I don't know, the Marlins, or some team that has a smaller fan base and a less vocal fan base, that's not a team that's a playoff caliber team, or a team that just won the World Series. It's it's a different story. But when it happens to the Cubs in a playoff race, it's a much
or in a
bigger
postseason
story.
Game, yeah,
it's a much bigger story, and it's going to carry on, and you're going to have to hear it, and it's going to be a much squeakier wheel that's going to need the grease.
Yeah, no doubt.
But I mean, going forward, this was really fantastic week for the Cubs, and they couldn't have asked for a better week of baseball.
Maybe a few Brewers losses, but that's out of their hands.
I mean, as far as things they can control, you had you had the bats came alive. The pitching for the most part was pretty darn good.
Look at Kyle Hendricks yesterday. He was phenomenal.
Yeah, he's a guy that I don't know why is Joe Madden has him on a much shorter leash than other guys. And I don't know why.
And he's the one who doesn't throw hard or have wacky mechanics.
Yeah, he has him on a short leash, and it's like he's just chomping at the bit to pull him out. I would have let him. Yeah. I would have let him go for that complete game yesterday. Well, yesterday, I mean,
I thought it was fine when they pulled him after the home run, but
yeah, but he always gives up that one solo home run. That's like his thing, his calling card.
It wasn't even hit hard. It literally just a pop up that got into the wind.
Yeah, but I mean, it was much more of that situation was much more of a I'm okay with him getting pulled, but he's a guy that Joe Madden is just way too anxious to pull. I probably would have let him at least go one more batter, because if you could have got him a complete game and not had to go to Wade Davis 3 days in a row, that it's much better. Preserves your bullpen.
Yeah, and I mean, look at last year. Look at both Game 6 of the NLCS and Game 7 of the World Series, where he was pulled, before I think that he should have been pulled, but, that's just kind of fits the theme there of his short leash. And, I mean, another interesting thing about him is that this is a guy who can be so efficient with soft contact. It doesn't throw wacky, hard stuff, so the fatigue's probably not the same as other pitchers, and he also picks off a lot of guys, so, it's weird that there's such this short leash on him.
Yeah, I don't understand it, but, you can't always explain Joe Madden. He's just Joe Madden.
No, you can't.
But, yeah, so going forward is the Cubs have 13 games left. It's 2 versus Tampa, 2 in Tampa against Tampa, 4 in Milwaukee against Milwaukee, 4 in St. Louis against St. Louis, and come home for 3 against Cincinnati. And the magic number is 10. The Brewers, they've got Cincinnati, Pirates, Cubs, and St. Louis. So they have a much easier time, I would say, but still, we look at it is if the Cubs are able to go 6-7 in this, means the Brewers got to go 10-3 just to tie them. So I'm not comfortable yet, but I'm starting to get more comfortable.
It's like when you say that, we should be more comfortable than we are, but we're not going to be comfortable until it's over. Let's face it.
Yeah, I mean, the Cubs, even when they've played pretty bad, have hovered around 500. So 6-7, 7-6, that still makes the Brewers have to play just absolutely lights out baseball. They have no room for error.
Right, exactly.
And if the Cubs can even split that series against the Brewers,
I think that'd be great.
I'd be happier if they swept them, but if they even get a split 2-2, that just really minimizes the chances of the Brewers making the playoffs.
Well, if you win 2, that knocks the magic number down 4 ticks alone. So
yeah, and I'm actually glad it's a 4-game series rather than a 3, because it's a 3. It's much easier for a team to win 2 or 3, even a sweep. 4-game sweep is really, really hard, and
yeah,
it gives you a much better chance and odds for a 2-game split, and a 2-game split in a 4-game series is just absolutely a victory for the Cubs.
Sure, absolutely, I agree.
So I say we move on to talk about this awful franchise known as the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I guess we have to at some point.
I don't want to dwell on it too long because this was a bad game in all 4 phases: offense, defense, special teams, and coaching.
Yeah, both coaching on the field and off the field with comments.
I didn't even hear the comments, so you'll have to fill me on those. But
okay, I will.
I just turned it all off.
Well, I didn't see the second half because I turned on the Cubs game.
I was flipping back and forth. So this was a game where Mike Glennon became bad Jay Cutler. We always talk about good Jay and bad Jay. Mike Glennon was bad Jay today.
Yes, it was. And it's a shame because the first drive of the game for the Bears started off so promising, and then a horrible throw into triple coverage, and he gets picked.
It was bad, and Mike Glennon just had a really bad game, and you saw all the limitations that he has just absolutely highlighted and circled in this game. Every one of his shortcomings. He has poor pocket awareness. He has poor ability in the pocket when it's starting to collapse. Like he's not. Ben Roethlisberger is not the most athletic of guys, but he is nimble enough and strong enough where he can either step out of a arm tackle or he's nimble enough to sidestep away from pressure. That's the example of what you do when you are not an athletic, nimble guy. Tom Brady and Peyton Manning are two other guys that did the same thing. But
Right.
Mike Glennon, when he drops back in that pocket, that's where he is. That's where he's going to go. And he has poor pocket awareness, so he doesn't, feel that pressure to get rid of the ball. He doesn't even step up in the pocket when the pocket is collapsing around him. Doesn't step up into an opening. He doesn't protect the ball well when he's back there, and he's not accurate. And when he's looking for reading the coverages and seeing who's open, he always looks short first before he looks downfield, which means by the time he looks downfield, there's pressure is on him and he's going down. And when he sees somebody open underneath, he's just going to go to them. So he never even looks downfield. So it's
Because what, on that first interception, Adam Shaheen was like wide open, wasn't he?
I don't recall, but the thing is that he doesn't look downfield. It just everything is my safety valve's open. Let me just dump it to him.
Right.
And his throws aren't particularly accurate. And I unleashed a fury on Twitter against Michael Wilbon, who I don't know if you guys all know this. I hate Mike Wilbon.
I'm not surprised.
I used to think he was all right many moons ago, but he's become an absolute just caricature of himself, and he's just lazy journalist. He's just lazy.
Part of me thinks it's just a bit, and it's a very annoying bad one. But yeah, I get what you mean.
He's become a Mike Glennon guy, and part of it is because he doesn't like Mitch Trubisky, and he didn't like Jay Cutler. So when Jay was gone, he was like, well, they got rid of Jay and they brought in this guy, and he's gonna back him up. And so he was blaming everything he could except Mike Glennon for these. So basically, anytime Mike Glennon had a bad throw, I was just tweeting at him, was like, I suppose with Mike Wilbon logic, it was the receiver's fault that the ball bounced to him before it got to him. Suppose it was the receiver's fault. It was that the throw was so far behind that it hit the defender who was trailing in the back of the helmet.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds like what John Fox said in the post game today, which was, you can't put this loss on our bleh, sorry words. You cannot put this loss entirely on our quarterback. And he had no criticism or no bad things to say about Mike Glennon, and from the quotes I saw that people were quoting, and he said, you can't put it all on our quarterback. And when someone asked about Mitch Trubisky, he said, no way he's starting. It's still going to be Glennon. So, what does that tell you right there?
Yeah, I mean, if there's absolutely no way, then why is he the backup quarterback? Why isn't Butt Fumble the backup quarterback? If there's no chance, no matter how bad your starting quarterback plays, that the backup is going to come in, then what is the point of making Mitch Trubisky backup? If you're saying we're not playing him, period, end of story, then why even have him on the sideline? Because all you're doing is making the fans more and more furious.
Yeah, I know, and I just there's so much right now with this team that I don't understand, don't agree with, it's getting to the point where I'm like, well, why even bother having an alternate thought? Because you know that things are just gonna stay bad until they don't, which is when John Fox is gone, or when they finally wake up and realize here that this isn't a good idea. And I get Mitch Trubisky is kind of a difficult. It's a difficult situation because on one hand, you don't want your young kid being killed in meaningless games, but what good is it if he's going to sit on the bench the entire year, do nothing, and learn under Mike Glennon? I don't know. It doesn't seem right to me, and it just seems like John Fox and co are just like, Mike Lennon's our guy, and there's like no alternative thoughts or reasoning here. It's just Mike Lennon's their guy, and that's it.
Yeah, and Kevin Fishbane posted a quote from Ryan Pace after last year's embarrassing loss to Tampa Bay. And you could have just applied it again to this game. It was something along the lines of, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, well, we weren't prepared. It was basically saying that we need, even if we're, we know we can't compete, we need to be prepared to play this game. And this was an embarrassing loss, and we can't let this happen again. And I'm just like, but it happened again against the same team the next season. Like, you didn't learn
Yeah,
anything.
it was pretty much the same game.
You learned nothing from that game last year.
Yeah.
This is a team
Yeah.
that I get that up front they've got a solid, front seven, but Chris Conte is their starting safety. Go deep. Go deep.
Did you see him thinking Gas Money Bob was actually being serious? And they said, ho, typical Bears fans. And then everyone started laughing like, dude, it's a parody account. Did you see that?
No, I didn't.
Oh, my God. Well, he deleted the tweet, but just Gas Money Bob is a legend, and he's absolutely a parody, and everyone knows it, and Chris Conte did not realize that, so he went on a long anti-Bears fan rant, and and then it was pretty funny.
Yeah, Chris Conte is terrible. Chris Conte shouldn't have a job in this league. He's terrible. And you should attack anytime you can. I mean, just go after him. And they didn't. And the one time that you got him on coverage was fourth down and I think it was goal. And that was the pass that I believe it was Zach Miller in the end zone, but it was thrown so far behind that the receiver was open. The Chris Conte was trailing him, going towards the out of bounds, towards the sideline, and the ball was thrown so far behind that they were like, "Oh, I'm surprised that wasn't intercepted." And no, because Chris Conte's arms don't go backwards. They almost hit him in the back of the helmet. It was such a poorly thrown ball. And, like, I get it. You don't want to put in Mitch Trubisky because this is a bad team, and you don't want to put him in when you're down 26-0 or whatever it was.
Yeah, in that game, no. Like, what a lot of us were saying was, if we want to see Mitch Trubisky, we want to see him starting a game next week, not being thrown into this situation.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bad team. And I have a feeling that we're either going to see Mitch Trubisky after the break, so after the bye week, which will be game 9, or we'll see him after this really rough stretch where it's the Steelers and the Packers, and it'll be after that rough stretch.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people think as well, and I agree.
And honestly, I think this isn't even a John Fox decision. I think it was handed down to him that you do not play Mitch Trubisky until you are given the okay. I honestly,
yeah, and I think that's very possible. Yeah,
I think at one point, if this would have been 2 years ago, John Fox would have had full authority to do that, and I think that it was made very clear that John Fox does not have the power to do these things. That this is Ryan Pace having the power, and this was a decision passed down, kind of like Bulls decisions from Gar Forman about playing time, that Mitch Trubisky doesn't play until Ryan Pace says he plays, which is a tough position for John Fox, because if he doesn't win, I think he's fired. And
he's as good as gone in my eyes. He's as good as gone.
And after this game, this is not something that a team that you've coached for 3 years can do. I get we had injuries. I get our wide receivers are decimated. I get you have a terrible quarterback that's starting. I get all these things, and you're on the road, and that team has tape on you. You don't have tape, and it's hot and humid, and this is their first game, so they have no injuries. I get all those things, but you played with such a bad effort and such poor fundamental football and so many mistakes and such a bad game plan and such bad adjustments mid-game.
Punting when you're down and you need to go for it.
So I guess one of my biggest problems with today's game was you played a really poor first half. And this is a team...
4 turnovers, for goodness sake.
Yeah, so many bad penalties that put you in a bad spot defensively.
Can I just add one little thing here? Just one little thing. That Tariq Cohen mistake on that punt was as bad of a mistake as you can make right there. Like, I don't know what the hell he was thinking.
Yeah, that was... You can't defend that. There's just no defense for it. And that's not a rookie mistake, because you should know that from high school. You should know that from Pee Wee. You just let that die. Like even I don't even play, and I watch and I know, just let it die. Even if it's gonna roll down there, at best is if you feel it's rolling, you fall on it. Just at best, and I don't even think you do that. You give up those extra couple yards, and rather than risk that fumble, because there's no way you're gonna make some heroic play where you catch it and you run 80 yards for a touchdown. That's just not gonna happen. Is take the the ball when it dies, and you start your offense there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was bad. But I just wanted to add that in there. So anyway, your point, continue.
Yeah, so you had a really bad first half, and you're playing against a team that many people think is a real contender to win this division. So you know it's a pretty good team. Odds are you're not going to come back down from, was it 26-0 at halftime?
Yep, 26-0.
You're not going to come back and win, but you can come back and really right the ship and play a much better second half and set the tone going forward for future games. That's what you can do. And you go in there and you make your halftime adjustments. You try to get more pressure on Jameis Winston. You come out, try to have a sustained drive on offense, put some points on the board, keep your defense fresh. That's the things you kind of do. Quit doing the mistakes, blah, blah, blah. So what did they come out and do? You start the second half with one of the quickest 3-and-outs ever, and your defense comes right back out on the field.
Yeah, that was, yeah. I didn't see any of the second half, but, I saw that on the drive chart, and I'm like, okay, nice going here. Really, really good.
Yeah,
and that's when I quit completely. I'm like, I'm not paying attention. I'm not following any stats until after the game. Done.
Yeah, and then you had just bad game management. There was a 4th and 10. And it's late in the game. It's 4th and 10. You're down by a ton of points, and they threw. It ended up being incomplete anyway. But had it been completed, it would have been a 4-yard pass on a 4th and 10. 4-yard pass. So you mean to tell me all day long, when you haven't been able to break a tackle to get yards after the catch, you're expecting to get 6 yards after the catch down by the end zone where the field shrinks because even your deepest guy is not that deep anymore. That's what your game plan was?
Yeah, not good.
And the first interception to Deion Sims, it was thrown to a guy. It was a bad pass that was thrown in triple coverage, and it was a bad execution and an even bigger mistake mentally. I just don't understand what Mike Glennon and his stork neck were thinking. This was just a bad game.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing good to say about it. Absolutely nothing good. They rushed for 20 total yards, for goodness sake. I mean, Tampa Bay was completely prepared for what the Bears had in store. They knew who Mike Glennon was. I mean, he played for them, for goodness sake. They knew that the run game was going to try to be their strength, so they bottled them up. The line couldn't block for the run game either way. And they read Mike Glennon every time, and Mike Glennon got a bunch of garbage yards in the second half, but that's when it didn't really mean anything. So I can't say one good thing about this game at all.
No, me either. And the thing is when you have a quarterback that's just so unwilling to even look downfield, and the other team knows, they know it absolutely and they knew the Bears' game plan was going to be to run the ball. They stuffed the run. They made sure they know what the run plays were. That the Bears call. They stuffed those runs, and they had extra guys up in there to defend on the run because they knew that Glennon is not going deep. And the Bears, even if he wanted to, you don't need to have double coverage on any of the Bears receivers because they're so bare bones at receivers right now.
Exactly.
And Deontay Thompson is your best wide receiver. It's not a good place to be. And,
no, it's not.
And I'm not even knocking him. I think he's going to end up being a pretty solid receiver, but he's
not a number one.
He's not a number one. If you have Marcus Wheaton healthy and you have Cam Meredith healthy and your Deontay Thompson could step up and prove that he's better than Kevin White. That's something that could happen. But he has to thrive when there's other people taking the pressure off of him. He's against the nickel back and single coverage. He can beat that guy.
Yeah.
But when he's against their number one corner and you got Mike Glennon who's not even looking down the past 5 yards anyway, it's just a really rough situation. And this is what you got. And I wanted to give Mike Glennon the benefit of the doubt, but we saw from training camp, we saw from preseason that this is who Mike Glennon is. And what I'm really upset about is you have Ryan Pace, you have the McCaskey family, you have John Fox, and they're all basically saying after last season, this is embarrassing to the franchise. We can't have this anymore. And what do? They come right back and give us the same thing.
Yep.
When is enough? When can we say enough is enough with Mike Glennon? When can we say that?
Well, I mean, we'll see what happens next week against the Steelers because according to Fox and Pace, mainly Fox, he's the messenger, it's pretty obvious that Glennon's going to still be the starter next week, and it's not going to be Trubisky.
Yeah, I mean, it's just mind-boggling the Texans, they realized that Tom Savage was not their quarterback. And even though Deshaun Watson didn't look great out there, I watched the game against the hell game was that? The Thursday night game, whoever they played, I can't remember. Cincinnati. I think it was Cincinnati.
Yeah.
He didn't look very good. And there was actually, I watched 3 consecutive drives where he didn't even throw a pass. They just ran the ball. But they said, listen, we know Tom Savage isn't the answer, and we know Deshaun Watson isn't ready per se. But we're still going to go with him because we would rather lose while getting him better than whatever Tom Savage is going to bring to us, because he's not the future and he's not good enough. He's not good enough to bring us to the playoffs, and we're not getting anything else by having him. So why not play the youngster and get him ready?
Mm-hmm.
And that's my point with Mitch Trubisky. Is you can say we know he's our future. We love what he's done so far, but we don't think he's ready. But Mike Glennon is not taking you to the playoffs.
Right. I mean, you got to play him sometime. If he's the future, you got to play him sometime.
If you look at statistics of teams that start 0-2, their odds of making the playoffs are like 11%.
Right. Yeah.
So you are already against the 8 ball of making the playoffs. So why not? He's not your quarterback and he can't even be mad, because if he would have gone out there and taken care of business and proven that he's the starter, no one would be questioning it. If Mike Glennon went out there and threw for 300 yards both games, even if they lost for whatever reason, nobody would have blamed him. We would have all been like, hey, he put up the numbers. He looked good. The Bears just aren't good enough. No one would be mad, but he just looked terrible. And you have this shiny new weapon that you just drafted that's just sitting there, teasing all of us.
Right, exactly. And everyone kind of watches these games now, and I think it's going to continue to be that way. It was kind of this way during the game, I think, for many people. Even when the Bears are getting blown out, people will kind of still sit and watch and hope that Trubisky's going to come in. Like, cross their fingers that they'll still watch and hope that Trubisky is going to come in. So, it's that kind of point where no matter what happens, if Trubisky plays, we just want to see him play. Whether they're up by 30, down by 30, we want to see Trubisky play. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Eagles, is everyone said that Carson Wentz was not going to be ready to start his rookie year. He was coming from such a small program, and the competition and not playing under center and basically everything. There was like, there's no way. And even people that loved him and thought he could be a really good player all said, no, he's just not going to be ready. They're going to have to play somebody else, and then he'll come in maybe year 2 or maybe year 3. And that was not the case. They just played him right away. And sure, there was some times where he made some boneheaded plays, but he's gotten better and better. And now he's in his second year is a pretty darn good quarterback. And
yeah,
you could say the same with Mitch Trubisky. People are, he only had 13 starts in college, and he didn't snap from under center. He was who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter. This team is not making the playoffs.
No.
So get him ready. Next year when he comes in, he's already got 14 games started. So he'll have next year. You can't be, we only started 13 games. Well, he started 14 in the NFL. So he's ready to go. And you come in year 2 with healthy players, add some weapons, and get him ready to go. It's not like your offensive line is, I know it's banged up and they didn't play so well, but it's not like Mike Glennon got beat to hell. He just didn't have a lot of time to do things.
He didn't have a lot of time, and also it didn't really allow many holes for the run game. But yeah, it's not like he was sacked 6 or 7 times today.
Yeah, and part of it is, if you have Trubisky, it's going to keep people a little more honest because he can run, and he's going to look downfield. He's going to try to make passes that are longer than 7 yards. It's going to keep the defense honest. It's going to, hopefully open up the more for the run game. And part of that too is the offensive line has to play better. Part of it is Tariq Cohen can't bounce everything off to the outside. He's got to at some point learn that to just plant his foot and run north at some point, because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had a good game plan for him, is to string everything outside and eventually just force him out of bounds. And you know, where you're going to become dangerous is when they think they can just push you outside and you just use your athletic ability to stop and start, and you plant your foot and go north, and you disrupt their plan. That's how you got to do things. And you know, there's going to be times where he doesn't get as many yards, or where he gets a bigger hit, but that's what you're going to have to do to be effective every week in and week out in the NFL.
Sure, absolutely.
What else do we have? The tight ends didn't block well this game. That was another big problem. We have all these tight ends who are supposed to be good blockers, and they didn't block that well either.
The blocking today was just terrible. I mean, altogether, really. So, yeah.
I mean, it wasn't as bad as the 7-sack game that Cutler had against the Giants.
Well, no. But I'm just saying, in general, it didn't do its job.
It was just really ineffective today, and you couldn't do the things you wanted to do. You wanted to be able, and I don't think Jordan Howard is 100%. I know he has the shoulder issue, but he just doesn't. He
left the game today with a sling, so keep that in mind.
So he just doesn't look like the same guy from last year. You lost. I mean, Kyle Long still isn't back. Tom Compton had replaced him, and he went down for, I believe it was a hip injury for him, so who knows how long that's going to be.
Sitton has a rib issue.
Sitton's got a rib issue. Nick Kwiatkowski has a pectoral muscle issue, which is the same injury that the guy he replaced in Jarrell Freeman has.
Yeah.
So you're down to your third string middle linebacker. It's bad. And then
we have to hold the record for the amount of injuries the past few years. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's bad. And on defense, they didn't play that much better. Last week we talked about the first half of the Atlanta game. Defenders weren't wrapping up and weren't stopping the run at the point of attack. Like when they made the contact, they were allowing yards after contact, and that's just bad. It's one thing if they pick up 3 yards and then you make the tackle, but you can't allow yards after the contact. That's when the run game starts to dominate the defense. And the Bears today, they weren't wrapping up, they weren't tackling at the point of contact, and they made Jaquiz Rodgers, a guy they cut, look dominant.
Well, it was funny because when I saw Jaquiz Rodgers on the field, I'm like, you know he's going to score at least one touchdown against the Bears because it's the Bears, and yeah, sure enough, he did.
Yeah, it's just infuriating. You had too many penalties, and they were just really poorly timed penalties. I think there was 3 in the first half that extended drives. No pressure on Jameis Winston in the first half at all. They got a little bit more in the second half. You know, they finally got their first turnover of the season, and it wasn't even a forced turnover. It was a guy just dropped the ball. It wasn't, you know, they intercepted it or they punched it out. It was the guy dropped the ball. That's frustrating.
Yeah.
And you had Kyle Fuller had one hit him right in the hands in the end zone that would have just ended a scoring drive right there, and he dropped it.
Yeah, it was frustrating to see, and you know it's kind of a theme with the drops, and it's going to continue to be a theme. I hate to say it, but with the core that they have, you're going to have to deal with that all year.
And I think the ultimate just, you know, pisser is when they're down by 23 points, they had a 4th and 2 from the 47-yard line, and they punted.
Yep. I mentioned that earlier. Punts when you're down a lot, and you just need to go for it at that point. A lot of people were mad about that. At that point, I was so numb to the game, so I'm like, whatever. But yeah, it's kind of ridiculous when you think about it.
And just one of the stats that just shows how bad the defense played is you don't want a defensive back to lead your team in tackles. You either want it to be a defensive lineman or a linebacker. Front seven should lead your team in tackles. And when the Bears had all those great defenses in the Urlacher era, it was always a linebacker leading the team in tackles.
Yep.
That's how it's supposed to be.
Yep.
The theory is the front four swallow up the blockers and for the linebacker to come in and make the play. If the defensive lineman is able to just throw the guy off and make the play himself, that's more power to you. But when a defensive back has to make the play, that means either they're completing a lot of passes or the runs are getting to the second and third levels and they're having to come down and assist. And in today's game, the top 3 tacklers were Eddie Jackson, Quentin Demps, and Marcus Cooper.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that says a lot.
Yeah. You're seeing poor preparation from Ryan Pace in building this line or wide receiver core. Is you were banking on 3 guys with chronic injury issues in Marcus Wheaton, Kevin White, and Kendall Wright, or Marcus Wheaton, Kendall Wright, and Kevin White to be your core of wide receivers with Cam Meredith. And, the one guy who didn't have an injury history gets hurt, and then the other 3 get hurt. So,
yeah, really.
It's poor planning. It's poor planning there. Offensive line is you didn't try to make your offensive line better from the starters, and your best backup got hurt right away in Eric Kush, and you didn't try to do anything to improve your offensive line, so you had Tom Compton, who's supposed to be your swing tackle, playing guard for a guy who's injured, and we have no idea when he's coming back, Kyle Long.
Yep, and he's really important to your team, and still waiting on him.
And the thing is you didn't put him on the PUP list. You put him on the active roster. So, he's not playing, he's not practicing, so we don't know what's happening, and it's costing you an extra roster spot right now. And you moved, since you lost your backup guard and you have a hurt guard, then you've got to put a tackle at guard. And Tom Compton, he gets hurt, and then you're like, crap. So we got to then you got to make 2 moves. That's when things start getting bad, is you have to move your center over to guard, and then you have to put your backup center in. And then when your other guard gets hurt, you have to put in a guy who's terrible in Soul. And so at one point, Cody Whitehair, your center, had to play. He was playing center at one point. He played left guard at some point, and he played right guard at some point. He played 3 different positions in this game.
Yeah, that's not ideal whatsoever. It just goes to show what a bad situation it is right now. It really does.
I mean, the thing is, if you're Ryan Pace and you address your offensive line earlier, Kyle Long, because you have your medical people looking at him, you're following up with him, you're observing what's going on, and if when you're like, this was a serious enough injury, 2 injuries actually simultaneous with Kyle Long, you have to say, all right, we need to address this guard issue. And we've got a lot of cap room, we need a guard, and you pay somebody to compete because that could be a starter. And I know you had Eric Kush, he got hurt. But you also upgrade your tackles. Upgrade your tackles. Instead of giving Charles Leno a big raise, you upgrade over them and make them compete for a job. And if somebody gets hurt, then your previous starter is your backup. It makes you a better team.
Right.
That's how you grow depth. You don't go, all right, well, our starters were mediocre at best last year. Let's just add different backups. That's not how you get better. That's not how you build depth. You build depth by going, we're going to keep a guy that was all right and replace him with somebody that's better.
And building depth has been such a problem with the Bears for so long. That's what makes it so frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Kwiatkowski is a fine backup, but then suddenly you get Jarrell Freeman hurt, and he's pressed into play all the time, and then he gets hurt. It's just really frustrating. Is what if Leonard Floyd gets hurt? Where is any pressure coming from your defensive line?
There really isn't much then. And don't say that because you know it's going to happen.
Yeah, Pernell McPhee doesn't look right. Willie Young is not playing that well. And
yeah,
Sam
I don't
Acho
think McPhee is all there.
And Sam Acho is, he's just a guy that knows how to play the position. He's not going to get you a ton of pressure. This team is lacking star-studded players.
Right. Yeah, and we're sick of it, and it seems like we're a broken record every year when we talk about the Bears, but it's true. And it's what makes the Bears a team that A, lacks depth, and B, gets injured as so often as they do, is one of the reasons they've been one of the worst teams the past few years. I mean, that's the sad reality of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you stay healthy, you can compete. But it's like this team gets an injury. I mean, look at the Patriots. They lose, their best wideout. What do? They go out and play and win. They lose Gronkowski today. Guess what's going to happen? They're going to go out there and play with somebody else, and they're going to win. That's what you do when you're a good franchise.
And when you have good coaching, and when you have the right scouting, and when you have the right depth, like you said, when you're a good franchise. And there's quite a difference between the Bears and the Patriots right now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing is the Patriots, they get guys, and those guys learn the system. They learn it, and when it's time to come in, the coaching staff goes, all right, well, I know that this guy has what his limitations and his, what his strengths and weaknesses are, and you make him plug into the system, and then you mask the deficiencies and you accentuate the positives. That's
right.
What you do.
Yep.
That's how you coach.
Yep.
It's called the game plan. And next week, you've got the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are undefeated, and they haven't looked fantastic, but that offense looks pretty darn good, and the defense has looked pretty decent too. And then after that, you get a primetime game Thursday night against the Green Bay Packers.
It's going into the season, the Pittsburgh game was actually the game I predicted the Bears to win, but now not so much.
I predicted them to be, 1-1 at this point, and after next week, I predict them to actually be 2-1, and the season just kind of goes downhill from there. You get, after the Thursday night, you get another primetime game Monday night against the Minnesota Vikings. Then you get Baltimore, Carolina, the Saints, Packers again, the Lions, the Eagles, the 49ers, Bengals. It's not until weeks 13 and 14 that you face teams that are in shambles as well.
Right. Yeah. And by that point, it doesn't matter. Your season's pretty much over.
Yeah. I mean, the Bears realistically could be 3-13 again this year.
Yeah, sure. I mean, at this point, I wouldn't put it past it. I mean, I predicted a 5-6 win season going into this, but with all these injuries and all this stuff going on, there are times where it's like, when are they going to get a win other than like the Browns? Are they even going to beat the Browns? But some people are saying 0-16, and I'm not sure I buy 0-16, but, they may not win more than 3-4 games again this year. And look, this has got to be it. If nothing, if this is the same thing next year, there's a real problem here.
Yeah, I mean, if you have another 3-win season and there's not wholesale changes, this city is just going to lose their mind. I dropped my season ticket waiting list. I'd much rather just have my $100 that I have as deposit than just wasting it on season tickets for this team.
Yeah.
Not worth it.
No, it's not. At this point, it's not.
Bring in a real coach. Not. When was the last time that we went out and got the biggest name coach? Ever? Did it ever happen?
Can't think of
when
it.
When they brought in Ditka, he wasn't like, oh my God, this is the hottest name in coaching. And then after him we just had some dog turds. I mean, Lovey turned out to be pretty good, but what's he done ever since?
And look, here's my thing with Lovey. People bring up, he was fired 10-6 season, yada yada yada. If we wouldn't have fired it, I'm like, look, if we wouldn't have fired Lovey Smith, I guarantee you that we'd still be crap. I guarantee it.
Yeah, I mean, that was a 10-6 team, but that next year was going to be real bad because you won those games on just holding that defense together with shoestrings. Those guys are old, and they weren't going to last much longer.
Yeah, and that 2013 season brings back so many bad memories. Just, I mean, it's just, I don't know what's going to happen with this Bears team in terms of coaching. Who's going to be the next coach? I don't know. I think the whole Sean Payton stuff, I don't really actually see that happening. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see that. And because he's going to want player personnel, some sort of power beyond being head coach. And I don't think Ryan Pace is going to give that to him.
No, I don't think so either. I don't want to rag on Ryan Pace because I think he is a pretty smart guy and I like some of the stuff he's done. But I think there has to be somewhat of a culture change as well, and that involves him. Not saying, fire him, but I think there's got to be some changes here with his policy, with the culture established going forward, because clearly nothing's really getting better. And what's really kind of disappointing is that I thought things were getting better in 2015 when they beat the Packers at Lambeau and they were creeping towards 500 again. I thought, man, we have some better coaching in place. We have some young players here. We have a new GM. We have a new defensive scheme, even if there's not a lot on it right now. I really thought things were changing for the better. And then no progress has really been made.
Yeah, and here's the list of coaches since Mike Ditka. After Ditka, it was Dave Wanstead. He sucked.
Yeah.
He went on to suck after that, too. The only time that he was anything was when he was with Jimmy Johnson. That just says that Jimmy Johnson was good. After that was Dick Duran.
Dick Duran! It's not my show, but I'm on that show.
Dick Duran was terrible.
Entertaining, but terrible, yes.
Lovey Smith. He did okay. But, again, it was time for him to go. Lovey Smith was a very good defensive coordinator and a really good motivator of men that had no idea what an offense was and how to work an offense.
And, I'm glad where he is now because he's recruiting some talent for the Fighting Illini, and I think having a guy like him who has such a respective, reputation, I think that's great. That's going to be a great thing to have for the Fighting Illini in years to come. So I'm happy where he is now.
Followed by, we hired a guy who wasn't even in the NFL in Mark Trestman.
Over Bruce Arians!
Over the reigning Coach of the Year.
Over Bruce Arians! I kept telling myself, it's okay, it'll be okay. It was just my way of masking, holy crap, we passed up Bruce Arians for this CFL guy.
And then we followed it up with a guy who had just been fired from a Super Bowl contending team in John Fox.
Yeah, well,
So we need somebody that is going to come in and change the. So we may have somebody in there, and I like some of the things Ryan Pace did, and I fully agree with you. But we need somebody that's in that locker room, changing the culture from the inside.
look at what the Cubs did, changing their culture. Look what that did for them.
Yeah, you can't turn the corner without somebody there leading it.
Right.
And John Fox is not doing that.
No. And it's just John Fox is too old school. He's too conservative in his play calling, and that kind of stuff's got to change.
And part of me has been like, well, if you lose John Fox, then you're going to change your whole coordinator scheme, and you're going to lose Vic Fangio. But you know what? I'm okay losing Vic Fangio because this defense hasn't been good enough as it is. Part of it's been lack of talent. Part of it's been injuries, but they haven't been good enough.
Well, and I also think the players they have now don't really fit a Vic Fangio type scheme, because I think Vic Fangio is one of the best, but you know him, he likes to generate turnovers, and this is not a defense that generates turnovers by any means.
Yeah, this team gets no turnovers. And so it's really frustrating is things have to change, and we as Bears fans deserve better than this. And I know we're never going to be perennial winners until the McCaskies decide to sell this team.
But the thing is, they're not going to.
Not anytime soon. At some point, though, is Virginia's going to be gone, and her kids are going to be old, and who are the next generation? Are they going to care, or are they going to see we could sell this team for $3 billion?
Right, and when I say they never will, I mean that in the sense of, don't expect it soon, because that ain't going to happen. Now, I mean, one of the kids, Michael McCaskey, he was part of it, and he's not really part of it anymore, is he? It's pretty much all on George at this point, right?
Yeah, I think it's all him, and he's not a spring chicken.
No. And, I wonder if Virginia passes away and a few years pass and things don't work out, maybe George will just decide he's had enough. I don't know. And I don't want to wish death upon anybody. I'm just playing out different scenarios. So, I don't know. But right now, we have the ownership who we have.
Virginia McCaskey is 94 years old.
Hey, and I give her a lot of credit. She still looks great for 94.
A lot of money will help you with that. But yes, she's not gonna be around that much longer. And I'm not one of those people like, oh, I wish no. I don't wish that at all. But just the facts of human beings only live a certain amount of time, and she is well past the average life expectancy of human being. So she, what happens after that, who knows? Because this team there's what they value the team at, and then the opportunity to own the Chicago Bears, that they would get so much money for this team.
Oh yeah, I mean, what do you think they'd sell for right now? If someone bought the franchise, how much do you think they would buy it for? What's the value? It's got to be in the billions, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
2-3 billion, maybe.
Well, Forbes estimates as of September last year that the Bears are worth $2.7 billion. Based on the fact that the Bears and the NFL franchises are going to be worth more and more, I would bet they would get probably $3.5 billion for them.
Sounds about right. It's got to be at least $3 billion, I would think.
Yeah, and it's hilarious when you look at the the value list of these teams, you see like, oh, like this team, what they were sold for last time that they were purchased. So like the Dallas Cowboys they're the number one ranked team as far as their value, and they're valued at $4.2 billion. And they were purchased by Jerry Jones for $150 million.
Man.
You have the New England Patriots. They were purchased for $172 million. The Washington Redskins, they were purchased for $750 million. The Bears, they were purchased for $100.
Doesn't that give you perspective of value of money over the years?
Yeah. So it's funny. Their operating income is $104 million. They make so much money off of this team. But it's hard to turn down billions.
Yeah.
When you never have to do anything else. You don't have to wait for the money to come in. You're already rich, but you just become filthy, stinking rich.
Yep. Because the Chicago Bears, no matter how good or bad they are, like the Cubs, it's a cash cow. They're always going to be one of the most wealthy teams in football and in all of sports. This isn't the Jacksonville Jaguars or, like the Houston Texans or something. This is the Chicago Bears. This is one of the most valuable franchises in all of sports.
Looking at the Cowboys, they paid $150 million for that team, but their operating income is $300 million a year. So they just paid for themselves in like half a year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
who would have thought? Who would have thought in 1989 that was a wise investment?
Seriously, I mean, wow.
I mean, even looking at the number 32 team, like the Buffalo Bills, they're the least valuable franchise. They're worth $1.5 billion.
The Buffalo Bills are the least valuable of all the teams?
Yeah.
Less than the Jaguars? Less than... Really?
Yeah, from the bottom. Number 32, Buffalo. Number 31, Detroit. Cincinnati, New Orleans, Tampa Bay, Cleveland, Kansas City, Jacksonville, Tennessee, Arizona, Carolina, San Diego / LA, Oakland, Atlanta, Indianapolis, Minnesota, Seattle, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Green Bay, Miami, Denver, Philadelphia, Houston, Chicago, the Jets, the Rams, the Redskins, the 49ers, the Giants, the Patriots, and the Cowboys.
Wow, the Houston's that high. Wow. I mean, I know they're in Texas, but I mean, Texas is Cowboys country, but wow, yeah.
The Buffalo Bills, they're the worst team. Their operating income is still $26 million a year, and they paid $1.4 billion for that franchise.
Wow. Well, I mean, the Buffalo Bills are sandwiched between a lot of big fan bases up there. You have the Giants, you have the Jets, you have the Patriots, you have all those huge. You have the Steelers.
They're West, so they're in like Steelers territory.
And think about it, the Steelers have one of the biggest fan bases in all of sports. So that's you're competing with some of the biggest fan bases right there.
Yeah, so it's a tough place to be, and that's probably why they're trying to move.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. That was a franchise that once made 4 straight Super Bowls without winning one, and they have such a weird history.
But next week, the Bears get the Pittsburgh Steelers, the undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers, and they're going to be who knows what the injury situation is. Maybe there's no Jordan Howard, but but who knows what the offensive line is going to be. And you're still going to have Mike Glennon as your quarterback. So don't expect a win next week.
No, like I said, when the season started, they were my pick to win of the first 5. I thought they were going to go 1-4, and that was going to be the game they were going to win. But I am starting to doubt that now.
Yeah. So I don't know if you have anything else, but I'm just so fed up with this team that I don't really want to say anything else.
You know, it's like it was such a terrible game, but that sweep of the Cardinals was so epic. It made me kind of forget the whole thing because that was a really important sweep of a really good team that just won their respective championship. And this loss would have felt a lot worse, I think, if the Cubs didn't do that. But the Cubs are really a good distraction because, boy, that was a heart-pounding game. It felt like a postseason game, and it made me forget all about that Bears debacle. So it eased the blow a little bit, I think.
A little bit. I'm still an angry person.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I was more angry last week just because how close they were to victory. Like, the Bears had no chance from, like, the first few plays of the game, so it was like, well, they're going to lose, they lost, yada yada, so that's just my opinion. But it was still a very, very poor showing and very embarrassing.
Yeah, at least, last week the Bears lost a close one and the Cubs got swept. So it was
that's
miserable
true.
Last week.
That's very true. You're absolutely right about that.
But I think that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swirsky Sports Talk Chicago. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please make sure you subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. Share with your friends. And if you want to contact us, at ShyFanPat1 on Twitter or at Swirsky Sports, SwirskySports.com, Facebook.com/SwirskySports. And thank you so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears. Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.